Welcome to TAP and welcome to TAP In today with a very special guest. Welcome, Anthony O'Connor.
Thank you, Mannah. Lovely to be here.
I'm really excited as well on many levels because we share similar interests, and I have a story that I'm really excited to share with you, and I know you have stories for me.
Hmm.
Let me first just give people your title. So you are an East Asian medicine practitioner, a writer, and a podcast host. So we share that title
Hmm.
on WesHtern Philosophy.
That's it.
So that's pretty cool.
Mm.
And people can definitely find some interesting topics being discussed on there. You're doing a great job together with someone called Bart.
Bart Laver, yes, a very good friend, and thank you for the kind words, Mannah. We try to keep it interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So I read an article by you, and I thought maybe we should have that as a title
Hmm.
with this nature-based diagnosis. And because I practice Qigong, I know bits and pieces from Taoism and how it's all a model of it's an attempt to model nature in these Qigong practices and
Mm.
as a way of life,
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
a way of imitating nature and that natural flow. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that,
Hmm.
opening up to whatever you want to say.
I love the idea of modeling nature,
Mhm.
and I love that question, Mannah. That's really cut straight to the heart of things, because it was once described to me by a Chinese person. So I studied Chinese medicine in China, lived there for 3 years, and somebody was once talking to me about the difference between Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine. So obviously there is some similarities with prana and chi, and a lot of the chakras are also acupoints and so on. And what they said is that strict Taoists or historical Taoists, and I should preface this, it's hard to make any broad statements about China because it's so big and it's been around so long. But in general, Taoists don't like meditation. And the reason being is that you are guiding the chi with your mind, right? And you are trying to bring it to the chakras and bring it to different places in your body. But it's the conscious mind is involved in this. Whereas with Qigong, what you are doing is exactly as you said. We are modeling the natural pathways of Qi in the environment, and we are just replicating that in our bodies. The conscious mind has very little to do with it. And I definitely do not think one is better than the other. I think actually this is the great this is the great fascinating thing about Taoism is that animals plants, animals, all living things, all moving things follow the Tao. But in my perspective, humanity alone has a choice about whether to follow the Tao or not. We have consciousness. We can look at the natural way of doing things and we can follow that, or we can oppose it, or we can try to improve it, quote unquote. And I think this little conflict is really, really fascinating. And I think if we weren't, I think we were given that ability for a reason. I think if it was just as easy as doing what the animals did, life would be a lot simpler. But we have been given this extra wrinkle where we have choice, we have free will. And for me, like whether people realize it or not, I think a lot of us struggle with that. You will hear a lot of like alternative practitioners say, this is the natural way of doing things, or this will bring your body back into balance. I had a really wonderful acupuncture teacher in Hangzhou in China called Feng Ninghan, and one of the greatest healers I've ever met. And I remember uh, he asked a question about what is an acupoint one time, and nobody could answer him, you know? And I know the textbook, the old texts in China, the definition of an acupoint is very interesting. It's where qi enters and exits.
Right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then he was like, good. Now, what do they do? And a foreign student, maybe German or American, I can't remember where, they were like, It balances the body. You want to balance chi. And he said, no.
Oh, okay.
He said, nature never goes out of balance. What nature can do is nature can find a new balance within the body. So,
As in that we are nature.
yes.
Yeah, never
So,
goes out of balance, as in that's us, human beings.
absolutely. So, if you think about it, if you've been pushing really hard, if you haven't eaten, if you haven't drank, if you've worked for 15 hours straight, you'll pass out. And while you're unconscious on the floor, you're in perfect balance. You might not be in the kind of balance you want to be, but this greater balance is kicked in. I often compare it to two seesaws. If you go to a playground, you look at two seesaws, and one of them is perfectly level, and then one of them is tilted with one end on the ground. Which one of them is in balance? Actually, they're both in balance, but just one of them is considered to be more useful.
Yeah, it's like a healthy reaction to something that was not very healthy.
Yes, and it's and the reason I'm interested in that is because if we start saying I'm out of balance, it brings in blaming and guilt. And
Yeah,
for me, these are the enemies of healing. And I do truly believe that so much illness is guiding you towards a greater balance. And the illness is often not your enemy, it is a sign leading you somewhere. And that's why I really value things like astrology, like you do. And I love the name of this podcast, the Therapeutic Astrology Pod, because I absolutely believe that in terms of these greater balances, in terms of giving us perspective outside of our own lives and our own bodies, astrology is a phenomenal tool.
I'm really taking in that compliment. Personally, I'm really happy because I know that I scare a lot of people off, even from just the title, including astrology in there. A lot of guests that I'm potential guests I've invited have said no because of the astrology part.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate that someone gets it. And it's why I also like the abbreviation saying tap, because it's about tapping into something greater. It's not just the astrology that you may have heard of in like pop astrology. It's this wholeness, it's this greater source that we can tap into. And yeah, really include everything. Like I'm so happy that you're talking about this already. I call it non-pathologizing. That's what we talk about
Yes.
in trauma,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
not pathologizing ourselves. And that is, yeah, did you say the enemy in a way, right? That's the whole problem, is
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not allowing it to be there. I was telling you before this interview that I feel anxious today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot better now. But actually that's judgment, right? I don't want to feel it.
Yes.
The whole way that I can relax is to allow myself to say, no, she's present. There's a part of me who's anxious. And that is the way to, you know, be where I wanna be, is being inclusive of whatever is there.
Absolutely. Um, we have a dog, a big brown Labrador called Blarney. He's snoring next to me.
Nice. I can't
But
hear.
yeah, I can on my own podcast, you can sometimes hear him snoring in the background. He's very loud. So if that's enough to get you listening to Western philosophy, um, it is very cute. But a few months ago, Blarney had a sore tummy. Okay. He ate something and you could hear it gurgling, and he's just like lying in bed looking at you with his big brown eyes, you know. And I remember I went over and I was petting his head and he's just like, I don't feel good, And I was like, I think it's okay, buddy. And when a dog is sick, there's a reason we say as sick as a dog, because when a dog is sick, it's the whole world, it breaks your heart. So I was petting his head and I was like, it's okay, Blarney, it's okay. Whatever you need, I will get it for you. You don't need to do anything. I'll take care of you. And then there was this moment where I realized that when I get sick, I do not talk to myself like that. I am like, why did you do that? Why did you eat that? Why did you stay up so late? You had work to do today, you idiot, And where is that compassion, for ourselves?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Have you learned it though?
No. No, I haven't. I haven't.
Must
But
be the dance between, because it's also nice to have the explanations, right? Like, I know it's because I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. It's nice to have the explanations, but then
yeah.
not to go into some kind of blame around it.
Yeah. Um, when I did Kung Fu for a few years when I was a teenager, and my teacher had this really interesting thing he'd do if he noticed you were doing something wrong, right? Say you were like dropping your guard when you punched or something, and you're opening yourself up to a counter. He would he would come up to you and say, he's like, "You're dropping your right hand." He's like, "All I want you to do is just acknowledge that fact." He's like, "Do not try to change it. Just say to yourself, I'm dropping my right hand." He said, "If you start going, I need to keep my right hand up, that is all you're going to be able to think about. And
Mm.
something else will fall apart." So he's like, just acknowledge it. Just say to yourself, I'm dropping my right hand. That's fine, but I am doing it, but I'm just dropping my right hand. And after a few rounds, you just integrate that and you're not doing it anymore. And you did it by not beating yourself up. Thankfully, there was somebody else there to beat you up, which is maybe why it was easier. But the conscious mind, that blame, that judgment, it kept it out of there.
That's really great. It's
Mm.
often a point I find in therapy for myself. Yeah, it comes up. It comes up still, mostly in the past, and especially with newer clients come and say in trauma therapy, they'll say, "Yeah, I know that I'm doing this. What am I to do about it?" Right? That frustrates.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But that's an interesting point to be right there.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, the frustration can serve a purpose too. You know, like you're a qigong practitioner yourself, Mannah, and when we are working with the wood element, which is the energy of primarily the liver gallbladder, there's a really interesting thing about the energy of the organs in the body. Almost every organ's chi, and in this context, you can almost think of chi as just function, a body function. Almost every organ's chi descends. Heart chi descends because the heart is at the top. So it must go down. There is nowhere up for it to go. Lung chi descends as we inhale and then it ascends as we exhale. Um, Stomach chi, large intestine, small intestine chi, bladder chi, everything descends because, to put it bluntly, things come in at the top and they go out at the bottom, right? So the organ's chi, it all descends apart from two. One is the spleen, and the spleen has a holding chi. It's quite yin, it's quite feminine, it's supportive, right? It holds the organs in place. So if you have like prolapse or diarrhea or things like this where things are falling down, that is usually a deficiency of the spleen chi, so that holding function. And then the last chi is the chi of the liver, which is the Jue Yin, the terminus meridian. It's called reverting yin. It's the end of the cycle of the 6 meridians. And that is the chi that resets the chi of your entire body from the top of your big toe all the way up to the crown of your head and back down to reset the whole flow. So all of these organs are going down and only the liver is sending chi up. And what's the emotion associated with the liver? Anger, explosiveness, assertiveness. And I find that in modern society, we often talk about meditate, chill out, breathe into it. And if we're talking about the greater balance, sometimes you don't need to breathe into it. Sometimes that liver chi needs to explode up and outwards so that a new cycle can begin.
Wonderful. Oh, I love that. I feel very soon I'm going to share a story with you, but I want you to say something more before I do that. But that is something that my story will speak into.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, great. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The need for something to come out and, yeah, assert itself. Yeah. Oh,
Because
well.
anger, we don't have a positive word for anger, right? So like the negative emotion associated with the earth element would be worry, and the positive would be like thoughtfulness, or the negative of the heart would be mania, and the positive would be joy. It's all about a question of degree. But when it comes to the wood element and the liver, there's no real positive word for anger.
I th-
Maybe it's assertiveness or
yeah, I think my teacher will say resilience.
resilience could be it. Yeah. But resilience to me also implies enduring,
Yeah,
right?
true.
Not necessarily acting.
I think then creativity may be, or is that not? I might be confusing them, but I'm
No,
thinking,
it belongs in part to both. Yes.
okay, yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
that bursting out,
Yeah.
by doing, something where it's, yeah, no, I'm not sure. I may be mixing it all,
No, you're spot on. Yeah.
but it's because it's like a springtime where the seed has been planted and now we're
Yes.
seeing the effect of
Yeah.
all along. Mm.
But I think what people maybe sometimes miss about the springtime, because everyone loves the springtime, right? There's flowers and sun and baby lambs, but in the Chinese medicine cycle, the time of death is not winter, right? The idea of winter is that there's a lot of life. There's a lot of life growing, but it's underneath the soil. All the seeds are germinating, but you can't see them. The time of death is autumn, the harvest, metal element, where you cut down the crops, where plant life, is transformed into food and nourishment. This transformative aspect of death, So this is why it's so important to think about the five elements, the five phases as a cycle. They're not building blocks like the four Greek elements would be. Earth, fire, air, and water comprise the universe, whereas the five elements or the five phases, the wuxing of Chinese medicine and Chinese thought, are constantly cycling one into the next, into the next, into the next, into the next. They're in constant change. So if you want the joy and explosivity of springtime, well, you need to have the germination of winter, and to have the germination of winter, you need to have the death of the harvest, and so on. And you know, there's no real beginning.
Could you maybe walk us through those five phases? And
Mm-hmm.
then I'd like to ask you how you would use those to, well, diagnose someone.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Okay.
that it's a big one, but you
It,
can.
it it is a big one, and I don't want to go on too long because I love our conversation,
Okay.
Mannah. But what I will say is the way I often describe this is if the universe is one thing, it is chi. If the universe is two things, it is yin and yang. If the universe is three things, it is tian ren di, heaven, person, earth. If the universe is five things, it is the five elements, right? So if you think of the yin yang symbol is a circle, right? You can divide that as many ways as you want. You can divide it in one or two or three or four or five. It's the same circle. You're just arbitrarily dividing it. And then you can focus on these segments, but they're all valid. So it depends on which analytical model you want to use. And actually, in really ancient times, the theories of yin and yang and the five elements were opposing schools. And
Yeah.
it was by the time of the Huangdi Neijing, our second really medical text, our first theoretical medical text, about 3.5, 400 years BC, that they were integrated. And now we talk about yin and yang and the five phases, like they're in harmony with each other, but they're not quite in harmony with each other. They're different tools to use.
Okay, so yin and yang and five phases are two different,
Yes.
two different philosophies.
Mm-hmm. And if you go back, yin and yang were often divided. The the school of yin and yang was most commonly manifested as the model of the six stages. So they actually divided the yin yang into six, three yins and three yangs, and this is where we get the meridians from. The six meridians of the legs and the six meridians of the arms make up the 12 meridians of the body. So this 6 and 6 comes from the six stages. So not to get too technical, but if I am diagnosing someone, lately what I try to do is look at them in a slightly fuzzy way, right? Get a feel for them, okay? And I will be like, is this person operating on the level of chi? Is this more of a yin person? Is this more of a wood person? Is this more of a Xiaoyang person? And whatever comes to me first will guide me towards whatever analytical model that is.
I'm curious when you say that in a fuzzy way. I'm feeling like there's a fog, and then like there's a fog in front of your analytical model, and then you kind of sense into it. Is it like that, or
It's more that I'm trying to bypass my conscious mind because I quite frankly, when I look at a patient, I want to see a patient. I don't want to see a model,
yeah?
right? I want to see that person.
Mm.
And I have models that I am more comfortable with and less comfortable with. But again, the doctor I talked about, Dr. Feng Ning Han, he had dozens of models, scores of ways of analyzing a person based on modifications of qi, yin, yang, the 6 stages, the 5 elements. He would just flow through them all like water. And what ended up happening was like you rather than being like, I'm the 5 phases guy and trying to slot everyone into that, you were like, what does this patient need? How
Yeah.
are they presenting? And then you're like, what's the appropriate model? And then you're like, ah, shit, I hate that one. I'm no good at that model. But you're like, that's the one they need, you know.
So what if you're not very good at that model? What do you
You
use?
you learn and
Okay.
you find your way in, and often I find those models, the ones you have to work at, are sometimes the most important.
Okay.
You know, for me, it's the 6 stages. I was always really bad at the 6 stages. I never got it. And it was really, to be honest, I got through the exams, but it was when I was in practice, I was like, oh God, this is really important. I was like, it doesn't matter what I studied. This is what the people needed. So I like to go back to primary texts. So I got the old books and spent a lot of time beating my head against the brick wall of them. And now I actually think it's my favorite model. I think it has so many beautiful applications.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Great. Yeah,
Mm,
I think I cannot make a comparison to astrology because
mm,
I'm more like if people are seeking something like astrocartography, that's the reference that I got when you were saying something that you're not efficient at,
mm,
sufficient at. I would be like, yeah, I can tell you the surface level, but go to someone else. So
mm.
I'm not sure. I think the difference is when I'm talking about astrology, it's like there's so many things, and I can send people. Maybe it is the same. There's so much
I think it
knowledge
is.
in there. Yeah. But maybe the difference is that you're talking about healing someone,
Mm.
and astrology is a little bit different because it's not the actual knowledge that's gonna heal you. That's the therapy part of it.
Yeah, what I would say is I think Chinese medicine is more results based. Like if somebody comes to me with a sore knee, it's quite binary whether their knee feels better or it doesn't, you
Yeah.
know. But I think one thing astrology and and Chinese medicine really have in common, and when I'm teaching, I often try to get this across to students when they're learning, they want to gather as much information as possible, and they're like, "Oh, I know this symptom. This leads to this, or if they have this, it means this, and so on." You reach a level with your knowledge where actually it's about what you cut out. It becomes much more important what you don't say, where the focus comes in. I think this is particularly true with astrology, where, I mean, everybody's chart, you could spend a lifetime talking about one person's chart, right? Like the permutations are as close to infinite as makes no difference, you
Can you
know?
imagine how difficult it is when people have this expectation today that you can just have 1 hour with an astrologer
Yeah,
and that now your birth chart is read for your
yeah,
whole. It's like, no,
yeah,
1 hour. That's not,
yeah.
yeah.
My wife is an evolutionary astrologer, Katie from the Pleiades, as she goes by on Instagram. But she's a big fan of Barbara Handclough. But she was talking about how sometimes people will ask about like Pluto oppositions or something like this in the first session, and I was saying, like, because I've been practicing for quite a while now, and I'm like, there's stuff people are it's not appropriate to go into with people on their first treatment or session. Some things are a session 1 issue, some things are a session 3 issue, some things might be a session 20 issue.
Mm.
Like, I remember I was treating a spinal surgeon for back pain, so that was interesting,
Oh my
right?
God.
And there's lots. Like, it's fun. The amount of pharmaceutical reps that come to me is hilarious. But this gentleman was a spinal surgeon, and he'd had probably a fusion, in his back, a disc, or a fusion there for the back pain. And he was just like, yeah, the nerve is pinched and it's been fused, so I don't know what you're doing. He's like, but I'm desperate, so I'll try it. But I'm just being upfront. He wasn't being cruel, but he was like, I have no faith in you. And I was just like, you know what, man, we're just gonna relax the muscles around the area, reduce a bit of inflammation. We're gonna see what happens. He comes back and I was like, do you feel any better? He's like, maybe. I was like, look, we'll go again. And session 3, session 4, I think it was session 5, he came in. He's just like, okay, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? He's like, my pain is 80% better. And then I was able to say to him, all that stuff about inflammation and relaxing muscles and all that stuff, I was like, that's not what I'm doing. I was like, if you want to put that explanation on top of acupuncture, you can, but that is you're applying a biomedical framework to a model that is completely based on different principles. I was like, what I am doing is I'm diagnosing you in
That's
terms
what I
of,
was gonna say. You kind of lied to him then, actually.
he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to hear that what I was actually doing was diagnosing him based on the models of the 5 phases, and using intuitive acupoint discovery, asha points, and getting feedback from his body as I was needling. His body was guiding the needle manipulation. And I couldn't, another thing is, I couldn't do the same treatment twice on him, because the way I learned to needle spines is very much based on touch. And the back is different every time he came in. So he couldn't even be like, what acupoints you're using? I'm like, they're different every time. So this is also what I mean about fuzziness, is that there's a lack of specificity, which is actually a strength, but it's often viewed from the biomedical model as being a weakness, because they're like, well, you can't recreate that. And you're like, a musician can't recreate a performance, but that doesn't mean they can't perform,
Ah,
you know?
oh man, this it sounds like a really good acupuncturist. So that's we called you a medicine practitioner, but it's you are an acupuncturist, right?
Uh, for many years, that was my main thing. Now I mostly do herbal medicine.
Okay.
And the reason I call myself East Asian is because I trained in China, but the way I practice is very much based on the Taiwanese model of herbal medicine.
Okay.
Mm.
So I don't know if listeners is getting the same as me, like, oh, I want to go to someone like that. But actually, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. I'm also seeing acupuncturists, but I would love to have someone who would be really intuitive about it. That would be such an extra quality, right? If it was not just this is that, but if there's that sensitivity and yeah, that's what I heard you describing, right? That you're feeling into the body as it is presents itself today.
Yes, but I will say, and this is a bit of a bugbear I have about practitioners, I think you still need to do the work,
Yeah.
because some days I'm still not, I can't count on my intuition, right? Some days a person walks into the clinic and before they even speak, I know what they need. Sometimes I'm putting needles in a person and I go into a trance, right? And I come back into the room to take them out. And I was like, why did I do this? Like, but then other days I'm tired or I haven't slept well or I'm busy. And then it's so important to have the framework of TCM, of Chinese medicine, to be able to go, here's my diagnosis, here are the acupoints I know that suit it. I think I think there are healers out there that are genuinely, intuitively, naturally gifted and don't need to do this study, but I think they are very rare, very rare. And I think the vast, vast majority of us need some kind of framework that we can rely on and also then hopefully move beyond.
I really feel we're talking about the Virgo Pisces axis here. It's about how much intervention, how much intuition, and that the one side needs the other. It's just has to be
Yes.
like that. And in astrology as well, it's in the beginning when people were saying intuitive astrology, I was like, okay, did you do your homework? Because
Yeah.
it's really important to get the technical stuff. But now it's taking it more in because it is such a valuable extrasensory um, gift
Yes.
to be with that technical knowledge with.
And how do you parse it in a session, Mannah? Like how do you if somebody sends you a chart, like are there certain things you look for, or do you like look at the whole thing as a whole and then see what you're drawn to? Do you take into account what the person is asking or like what you might know about them? Like how do you figure out where to start and how to deliver it?
Well, yes to those yes or no
Mm,
questions.
mm,
I do need to see of the context, what country are you born in, what culture will
mm,
be infiltrated into you, and what is your question? Because
mm,
I can like talk about your childhood, but if you're here just to, when I'm gonna meet a husband or something like that, we need to look at the romantic side of things.
mm,
Um, and that of course will be interwoven, but I want to start where the client wants to start. And yeah, then I do feel resonance with what you're saying about getting that. I call it a bird eye view of the chat first.
mm,
Like, okay, this stands out to me, and then becoming curious of where is the client with that now,
mm,
right? Because there is something worse, but just for the phrase of for the sake of phrasing it, there's nothing worse than getting a reading where the astrologer is telling you about your past, right? That's really annoying. I'm past that. Don't
yeah.
talk to me like, yeah, I was, I'm past that. So it's really also being respectful about the evolutionary journey,
Mm,
so that you've been through stuff.
yes.
So I don't want to assume that you are at that same level, like you were talking about with, I call that, that's the Virgo side of us all. You are a Virgo sun, but
Mm,
it's in all of us, we have Virgo, and we all know that part that's critiquing ourselves, blaming ourselves. And if I were to just like expect that that was a new thing to you, you would be pretty annoyed, right? Because you
yes.
are very well.
Yeah.
And you've worked on it, and you are at a certain point with it. So
Mm,
it's really also about being respectful of that there is a process, and that you were talking about the dialogue before, that can
mm,
only come across as we speak to each other and I get to know
yes.
that's where you are. Then
Mm,
I intuitively know where in the archetypes I can help you, what
yeah.
knowledge to bring forth.
That's awesome. And I love that it's, I mean, evolutionary astrology in general is very broad, but then evolutionary astrology is bringing in so much more, you know, excuse me. And all of that comes down to this beautiful pinpoint moment between two people in a session.
Yeah.
And it's almost overwhelming, and it's also incredibly beautiful. I love that. And definitely the longer I practice, the more that I feel like the more, I don't want to use the word humble, but the more kind of um the less I, in a way, the less I expect from the treatments. And that doesn't mean that I want my patients to get less benefits, but like if you've been doing it long enough and you don't just look at it as somebody had a sore back last week and their back is okay this week, that's lovely. But if you then know that person for like 3 or 5 years, you're like, oh, they're in a cycle of working so hard, and then you're like, okay, why are they working so hard? Oh, their mother is sick, and they've got a mortgage and they've got a, and then and their boss doesn't respect them and gives them all the awful jobs, and all of a sudden it's not a sore back anymore. And And then in terms of what the treatment does, I mean, sure, they come in, you treat their back, but also really if I can just, I almost think of it like a clock ticking or something. If you can just move the direction of their life one notch more into self-compassion, self-awareness, and kind of self-actualized direction, like even if it's the smallest movement in that direction, over time that will have such a tremendous effect, you know.
Okay, I have 5,000 questions for that. Let me see. Okay, because uh, it's a little bit frustrating when you come to a medicine man like you as a client, and he'll just say, yeah, the needles work, but not if this or that or the other thing in your life is not working. And you're like, oh, but I can't change all of that. So I guess that's my first question. What do you do as a practitioner when people are suffering in other areas of their life and you can see, okay, my treatment is not gonna do the trick? And then how do you avoid that overwhelm that we can feel of, oh, I have to take all of these herbs, eat that food, think these thoughts? Know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, first of all, to answer the second question first, I use minimal intervention. So that's really, unless somebody is like in dire straits, I'm like, what is the smallest change I can make that will have the largest impact? I had a patient who was a single mum of 3 kids, 2 of whom had special needs. And she went to see a nutritionist, and the nutritionist gave her 4 different macro meal plans for her and her 3 children. And the stress nearly killed her, because she was working full time trying to raise these kids. And I'm just like, I don't care how good that food is. From my perspective, that's not helpful, So it obviously it varies from patient to patient, but I want to use the absolute minimum. So if I tell you to change a food, normally I will tell people, I'll give them advice about how to eat rather than what to eat. So I'm like, for example, if I want somebody to eat, uh, you know, if they're eating a lot of sugar, if they're snacking a lot, what I'll be like is eat more vegetables. Don't take out the snacks, but replace it with something more. Eat bigger meals, eat more, and enjoy it. I desperately try to avoid my patients slipping into what I call martyr mode. And it's very triggering for me because it's a mode I personally am very familiar with as well. I love taking the difficult path and feeling like I did the hard work, so some benefit must come of this, whereas it's not always like that. Oftentimes softness is more sustainable, more, I'm a pragmatist. I want people to get better long term. And like literally in pragmatic terms, I find kindness and softness get better results. And then in terms of yes, the needles work, but you must change this and this and this and this and so on. We were talking before the camera started rolling about another great doctor in my life, a man I've only met once, but who had a tremendous effect on me. So last year, I was in Taiwan and I interviewed a man called Professor Su Zonghua, who's a wonderful man. He's a published professor. He has 200 research papers to his name. He's head of Chinese medicine teaching departments. He's a practicing physician. He runs several charities. He's a truly wonderful man. He's also a best-selling author. So that's his book. It's a book about his case studies and so on, and stories about his life.
Can you say
Sorry?
the title maybe just for the listeners? The title, what is the title of it?
Well, I don't think it's available outside of Taiwan, but there it is, Dr. Su Zhonghua's book. But and I don't think it's not in English either. But we were talking, and I was interviewing him about something quite scientific. He had developed a formula to protect frontline healthcare workers in the early days of COVID, because he had been a frontline worker himself during SARS and was also working frontline during COVID. The SARS epidemic hit Taiwan very hard in 2007. So he didn't want his fellow frontline staff to get ill. So he developed a herbal formula made of simple herbs, common herbs, not too expensive, quick and easy to produce. And he distributed it to frontline healthcare workers, and also he's involved with a charity with methadone users, drug addicts that are transitioning to methadone, and people that are on methadone have severely compromised immune systems, so would be very, very at risk from COVID. And they now, whatever it is, 3-4 years later, they're doing research into why the formula was so effective, because it was very effective. So this is called a bed to bench study. So traditionally with drugs, you do research in a lab and then you try it in the field, you try it in the hospitals. But what they did here was they tried it in the hospitals first, saw that it worked, and now they're bringing it back into the laboratory to find out why it works. So we were talking a lot about science and research, and we started talking about global health. And something very interesting happened, and he just stopped and he said, "Okay, I'm going to have a conversation with you now that I cannot have this conversation with my professor hat on with all my scientific papers. I can't, you know, you don't talk about this too much." But he talked about a theory his father had passed down to him, that there are 4 levels to illness and therefore 4 levels to treatment. So one level is the body. It's very physical, right? So it's broken bones and bruises and so on. And because it's a physical, entity, it requires physical treatments. So it requires splints and poultices and physical and massage and physical treatments. Another level is the organs, internal issues, infections, endocrine disorders, hormones, and so on. And he said acupuncture, herbal medicine, really good for treating this. He said the next level is the mind. He said when there is illness in the mind, the best treatment is words. Okay. And then he was like, and then the next level is spirit. And he said, you can't really tell people how to treat spirit, but he's like, it's very important to have some kind of practice. For him, it's Buddhism. But he's like, you need to have just something you practice ritualistically, that he talked about clearing you, as in, and removing resistance. He was talking about electrical resistance. He's like, you need to let whatever it is flow through you by clearing stuff out. He said something very interesting. He said, the modern world is a world of diseases of the mind. He's like, this is where a lot of our issues happen. And therefore, a lot of the treatment will be with words. Now, I think that's something I'd love to talk to you more about. But to go back to your question, once I heard that, it changed everything for me, because I realized that certain practitioners fit into different brackets. Okay. So I used the explanation of the gentleman with back pain. Some people will just be the back pain guy. They're in the world of the body. And for them, it is beautiful to see somebody walk in with back pain and walk out without back pain.
Yeah.
And they can do that all day, every day. And do you know what? God bless them. We can get highfalutin here about like reaching up to spirit and stuff. If you have back pain and somebody can take away that back pain, that is very important, you know? In my practice, I was working with the body and I was working with the organs a lot. But when I heard Professor Sue say this, I realized that I'm actually more interested in working with words. And that is actually why I was getting quite dissatisfied with the work I was doing, because I always looked behind. I was like, why is your back hurting? What is the story that is sending you to the place where you keep injuring your back? And I always wanted to work with that story. So, yeah, you will just find different practitioners that work with different levels. You could find craniosacral practitioners that are channeling spirits from across the universe, and you will find physical therapists that are actually counselors in disguise, and you will find, but it's about knowing what kind of practitioner you are, and either finding the right discipline or finding a way to use the discipline you're in to focus on whatever level resonates with you, and none of them are better than the other.
Oh, well said. Really well said. Yeah. Yeah. No, none is better than the other. It's all about our well-being. And I'm also thinking about the guy with the back surgeon guy story here, that he He says he doesn't believe it, but yet he has a part of him that has taken him to you.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And we have to remember that about ourselves, but because that can happen often for me as well. When I go to someone, the first thing that comes up in me is like, I don't believe it. It's my skeptic part,
Mm.
but something in me took me there. And so
Mm.
that could maybe relate to those different levels.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that would be the spiritual level. Maybe I'm I'm here, but like part of me don't really understand why. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's an opening. And yeah, and hearing you with working in disguise, that's kind of what you did in that case, right? And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
who cares about it afterwards as long as it works?
Absolutely. And you need to be, Professor Sue talks about like doing your work, clearing yourself, like um, not carrying too much of your own ego, not carrying too much of your own trauma. Chiron is a big thing in my chart and my life. When my wife introduced me to the concept of Chiron, I was like, oh shit, you've got me there, And none of us are ever going to be completely clear conduits, right? I'm not the Buddha, you're not the Buddha. If you meet the Buddha, kill him, like none of us, that's not why we're here. We're not here to be perfectly clear. But I think it's in the attempt to become clear is very important. And I remember because I got my license quite young, and definitely in my early years of practicing, if I'd come across the back surgeon sooner, I might have been a bit aggressive. I might have been like, what's wrong with your model is da, 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 da. But I remember how it ended. I finally, on the fifth or sixth session, I was like, all of that stuff I told you about anti-inflammatory and all that stuff, I was like, it's not that it's a lie, but it has nothing to do with what I'm doing. Like I am working on regulating yin and yang through the 5 phases, through intuitive understanding of the body. And he started asking a million questions, and I was like, "There's no time." Like he was leaving. He was only there for, I think, only a week. He was around for, but I was like, I was like, all I've done is shown you the door here. I can't. There's no time, and I hope he went and he continued his study, continued his curiosity, and so on. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but like that's not up to me. Sometimes you just have to be like, here's the thing, and it's up to you what you do with it.
I really sympathize with that moment of getting a lot of questions in the end of a session.
Yeah.
And
Yes, I'll bet you do. Yeah.
you want me to explain the last 10 years of study to you in
Yeah.
30 seconds. I mean, so it's like I'm trying to like not rejecting it, but politely saying it's that I'm not able to answer that.
Mm-hmm. And it's also things arise when they're meant to arise.
Yeah.
This guy, if I dropped a load of Chinese medicine theory on him right then, it could have frustrated him or overwhelmed him, or, and also I think for men in particular, we need to feel ownership over our knowledge.
Mm.
Like if I say, or not even if I say, if I reveal a path to interesting knowledge to a man and they walk it themselves, if he walks it himself, it's very different than if I teach him. And pride can come into place there. And so there's also something to be said for walking the path too. Another great quote from Dr. Fung. He said, when treat 65% maximum. So you do a very specific diagnosis with a patient. You're like, oh, they have this going on and this going on. They might have a primary, a secondary, and 2 tertiary conditions. And you're like, okay, I can treat the primary like this, the secondary like this, and the 2 others like this. And he's like, no. It's like the body has an intelligence. What you're trying to do is clear enough space that the body can heal itself. It's like you don't treat 100% because you're trying to control everything then. He's like, for him, it was like 65%. And it's true. You don't have to chase every symptom. If you hit that tipping point, the other stuff starts to get better as well. But we don't think like that in the West. We're like, oh, you brought up this difficult transit and this opposition and this, and I want you to talk about exactly how I tackle each one of these in isolation, but they're not occurring in isolation, are they?
Yeah, good point. And I'm hearing you said something to the sorts of that just earlier. And it's in trauma therapy. Luckily, I mean, we are in that kind of movement of humanity is taking their authority back. Like you were saying, I can't just tell a man what to do, like he has to
Yeah.
walk it. So
Yeah.
because it's not fulfilling if we're just told what to do. The fulfilling part is that we take ownership of our own lives. And in trauma therapy, it's also about that, just removing the blockages so
Mm-hmm.
that you organically are moved through to that growth that are naturally in you, right?
Absolutely.
That's a similar idea, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. I want to ask you something about healing, and then we're gonna soon be at my story.
I am on tenterhooks over this story.
Me too.
You have set up the suspense beautifully, man.
Yeah. But I think maybe, I don't know, are you used to people wanting to share their stories about sickness and health with you?
Yeah, and I think that's where space becomes really important because, like, people where I live at the moment, I treat from my home here, and I live in a small community. So it's like sometimes I will see my patients out and about, and maybe they're eating a food that I told them is not so good for them, and they're like, "Oh my God, Anthony, don't look at me! I'm so sorry." And I'm like, clinician Anthony doesn't leave the house. The Anthony that stood in front of you right now does not care what you're eating. If you want clinician Anthony, make an appointment and I'll go get him for you. So this is a very nice space to talk about healing and things like that. But if we're talking about the big balance, I also need to be an actor within a community. I need to be an entity as well. And um, yeah, it is a bit weird where you're in a pub, and people are kind of coming up to you and going, Anthony. And then I had this a few weeks ago. A very good friend I hadn't seen in a few months ran across a bar to me, gave me the biggest hug. And she's like, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And she's like, I have such bad diarrhea. And I was like,
And now you can.
yeah, you can be useful.
Well, good if she only has to see you and then the nervous system settles.
Exactly. Yes, that's what I tell myself. Yeah.
If that's the effect, then that's wonderful. Okay, maybe I should just go to the story actually.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Um, so it is just a part, because we all have stories around when we get ill and sick and feel disease in our bodies. So it's just a little part of it I want to share. Like last March, we now, as we're speaking, we are in November, and last March I was doing the end of a therapist training, at the end of a 2-year therapist training. And it was we had like 5 days together. So people were getting sick there. And then of course you make the assumption it's plausible that I also get sick. So we'll keep that as one explanation model, right?
Sure.
But so what happened was, at the day before the last, I said yes to be on a demonstration therapy, like being the client, because I thought it was my wonderful therapist, idol master therapist who was in charge of the whole thing, who was going to do it. But then it was actually a student. And so I sat in that demonstration therapy. I was okay with it because the master therapist was right there next to her, assisting her. So it was okay. But we had a moment where I was said yes to this intervention, where I was like looking into her eyes, the student that was acting as the therapist. I was looking into her eyes, and I was supposed to look away when I felt like it. And what happened when I looked into her eyes was that I thought about things about her personally, like I don't trust you. Like you never emailed me back on this and that. You know, very.
Sure.
But mind you, Anthony, this was being recorded, so there was no way I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
Because he was not the therapist. If I had had that with the therapist, I would have been a lot more courageous to say that. But
Yes.
because it was a fellow student, I wouldn't say that. So what happened in that eye exercise, like trying to look into her eyes and just feeling naturally when to move away, I I didn't come to that point where I felt like looking away.
Hmm.
I could just look into her eyes, and then my conclusion was that, oh, that's weird. Maybe I don't have the thing that I was struggling with. You know, something strange happened because I suppressed something, right? There was something that I didn't say. This is my analysis of it. There was something that I didn't say, and so the exercise went a little bit off because maybe I was looking past it. We can always do that when we don't want to
Hmm.
face things. We can look past it, and then we can have eye contact. But I'm
Hmm.
actually not really checked into what's going on inside of me. Anyway, afterwards, I started feeling symptoms the day after. On our final day, it could not
Hmm.
be worse timing. I was completely out. Fever. I just
What
everything.
were your symptoms, Mannah?
It was definitely fever.
And were you feeling hot, or were you alternating hot and cold?
Wonderful that you're asking this. Um, hot and cold,
Okay.
hot and cold, and sore throat,
Hmm.
coughing.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, it just never went away. It wasn't just that day that it was annoying to miss that. It took months and months to recover. And I'm pointing to my lungs because it
Yeah.
like the cough, and even when I was officially healthy again,
Hmm.
officially out there with people again, I was still coughing. That's
And with the cough, would you have phlegm with the cough, or was it a dry cough?
Oh, this is so interesting. I don't know the difference. What is that?
You know, if you're coughing up, would you shift phlegm with the cough, or was it just like coughing without producing any phlegm?
It was like I don't know if it's an answer, but
Mm.
it hurt to cough,
Okay. And
and
was the
it's hard to
so-
breathe. It was hard to breathe, so it made me anxious as well. Like I can't breathe. Like is this ever gonna go away?
and was the cough better or worse at night, or did it make no difference?
During sleep, I don't think I woke up from it,
Okay.
but in terms of morning or night, I think that was pretty much the same. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
Did you want to say something? Us?
No, is that
Okay.
that's all my symptom questions for now.
That's in a bracket. Okay. Okay, so of course, and I also want to say that the thing that made it shouldn't have been. I mean, what makes it worse is if I'm employed, because then I feel really bad from not coming into a job, but I wasn't in that period, so that was off my shoulders. Yeah, just a little extra one. So now, fast forward to now, November, and I really like that we're having this discussion in this season because a lot of people are feeling it, feeling
Mm-hmm.
a little fluish, uh, and uh, and I've been feeling that up to this weekend. We're talking together on a Monday, and this past weekend, I was again going to another therapist training, actually as a psychotherapist training that I have to do to be accredited. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that I chose myself.
Yep.
I have to do it. I think that's relevant. Anyway, I've been feeling the symptoms, and but I thought it can't have to do with my mental health because there is no way that I'm gonna miss this. It's the last weekend because I actually chose to shift schools. So it's gonna be my last weekend with these people. There's no way I'm not gonna come. So I couldn't think that it would be in my, because sometimes you talk about maybe part of you don't want to go, right? And
Yeah.
I couldn't see that. Um, and so what I thought is, and maybe I don't know if you have this for yourself, but I know other people out there who sympathize with this, that you kind of just pull through, and then I'm probably gonna be sick for a few weeks after this, but I have to get through this.
Yeah.
So that's the feeling I went into it with. And what happened was I finally spoke up after almost a whole year of having been really cooperating too much, compromising, right?
Yep.
Compromising.
Yeah.
Have to take,
Horrible word.
yes. I have to adjust. I have to like adapt to this milieu, even though I don't agree to it. And then because I'm not scared anymore, it was the final weekend, I'm not scared of failing it anymore. Then I spoke up and I got angry and
Good.
I cried at one point, I think just
Good.
releasing. And afterwards, the teacher was asking me, are you still angry? I was like, no, it's joy. I'm happy now. And and it wasn't just only good, because part of it was I was met in my emotions,
Mm-hmm.
but there was also conflict. There was also
Yes. Yes. Yes.
saying to me, we don't agree to this.
Yeah.
And being a little bit triggered. But the point is, things were being said. The truth came out.
Mm-hmm.
That is what gave me energy.
Mm-hmm.
Truth came out. And it wasn't just, oh, okay, we understand, man, and now you can. No, it was also like, we don't agree to that. But it was like, oh, something really just was allowed.
Yeah.
It was allowed. And I surely expected that I was going to do this interview with a sore throat and maybe some fever. But I woke up this morning and I was healthy. I was like, what's going on? Where's my sore throat? I don't understand, because I had really I had really had these symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I feel completely well, and it just really amazes me. There has to be some connections here. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And you know, there's a way of looking at it going, oh, you picked up a virus at the first workshop and you were better, you know, your immune system was stronger at the second. That's true. You
Yeah.
know, that's true too. So my thinking of this, first of all, I want to comment on this lady who the student therapist who you sought a confrontation with. If you know, I mean, it's a very confrontational thing to look somebody in the eyes and not look away. And you were annoyed and you felt like your boundaries hadn't been respected. And this is where projection comes in, where the therapist should be a tabula rasa, where they should be a blank slate upon which the patient can project things. Okay. And I think this is like Professor Xu talking about being a clear conduit, having no resistance. When I come across something like that, I often find it with women, because in general, and we could talk about this forever, but men are not allowed to be soft and women aren't allowed to be angry, you know, a lot of the times in society. And it can be very healing for both of us when we connect with these things. And I will feel the anger coming up in a woman. And women often have like multi-generational anger as well. You know, there's a lot there. You know? So I do something I try to call setting off the mousetrap, where when I see it, and it depends on the patient. Like some people, I'm like, they're not there yet. We need to do some more work. But some people, I'm like, okay, let's let the anger out. And it's like you reach forward and you set off the mousetrap and it goes, and you just back away and you just let whatever comes out come out. And you need to be very calm in yourself. And what I find in that moment is, if you're there like, okay, you're getting angry, but that's not how the therapy goes. You need to do the therapy right. Now, don't be doing that. Don't be having an honest reaction. Come back into what we're doing. No, you have to let the patient assert their agency. And it can be very it can be contentious, it can be conflicting, it can be angry. And this is where doing it for the highest good of the patient comes in. I mean, as an acupuncturist, I stick pins in people. You know, it's like I cause micro traumas in order to heal. So for me, it's similar to this. And I think, you know, she's only a student, that practitioner, but what a good practitioner, what your maybe master practitioner would have been able to do is hold that anger as it was released. And I don't even really think it was anger. It was you asserting a boundary, you know? Now, I would view I'm going to call it a pathology, right? Your pattern here as being something called a Sao Yang pattern. So in the 6 stages, Xiao Yang is the third, and it is the boundary between Yang and yin. It is the boundary between the outside of the world and the inside of the world. Okay. It is defined by symptoms that alternate, hot and cold, up and down, left and right. It is defined by symptoms that move and that recur, that will go into latency and flare back up. Okay. And the reason they do that is because something is, your body is either trying to expel something back out throughout the levels of yang, back out into the inner world, or the pathogen, the thing that is stuck, the energetic, is trying to get in deeper into your body where it can like reach an organ or something. But your body is strong enough to stop it falling in any further, but not strong enough to expel it. Sao Yang is known as the pivot, the hinge. And it's like somebody getting caught in a door. And you're like, either we need to push this door open or pull this door open. But right now it's just stuck. When things are stuck, they develop heat. Heat flares upwards. So what happens is what we call a dysregulation of the ascending and descending of qi. Your lung qi is meant to descend and then ascend. When there is heat in the system, the ascending function becomes stronger than the descending function. It violently ascends. We call it rebellious lung qi or a cough. That's what a cough is. A violent ascension of lung qi. It's hot. It burns the throat. You get the scratchy throat effects. Also, this is the throat chakra. I would view your speaking up. So first of all, the Shaoyang is associated with the wood element, with liver, gallbladder, right? In the 5 phases, the 5 elements, there is the generating cycle and the controlling cycle. If the wood element is in excess, and Shaoyang and heat is considered excess because when it's stagnant, it flares up. You can control it by strengthening the metal element. And the metal element will, if it's strong enough, regulate the wood element. And the metal element is lungs, communication, grief, and death. Because the thing about speaking out is that you change things, right? Your relationship with that person dies and is reborn in a new form. Really scary. Often easier just to keep that inside. So I would view the speaking out as being the mechanism by which you regulated this pathology, which was a wood or Shaoyang pathology.
Ah, wonderful. Yes, I feel it. I really
Mm.
do. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things where, because of the way that we've learned to think, that I'm feeling doubt about it. But then even my skeptic part is like, if he, I feel it's a he, if he experiences something on his own body, he can accept it. So most of me is definitely saying this is what I experienced. Like I know it has to do with that communication, because it was such a shift from
Yeah.
feeling sick. And of course, yesterday evening I was tired, so I wasn't really feeling like very fresh at the time. So just waking up and feeling all my symptoms have gone. I have to trust what I'm experiencing.
Yes. And that idea of the Shaoyang pathology, that comes from uh, this old book called the Shanghan Lun from 200 AD. But that book is designed to treat infectious illnesses. You can use it to treat mental emotional disorders, and I do all the time. But those formulas are for severely infectious and deadly illnesses. We think that Chinese medicine is all for like to help you relax or to help you with your sore elbow or something. Like it has phenomenal, especially herbal medicine, has phenomenal applications in the world of viruses, bacteria, epidemics. So that's what fascinates me about that book, is because it's applying a universal principle to an infectious disease. But because it's a universal principle, you see it cropping up in other places. Because, of course, while an infectious disease attacks our body, there is no separation between our body and our mind.
Mm.
So you can still use these formulas to regulate. I could have diagnosed you there just based on your symptoms and your body, and I could have left the mental emotional side of it out altogether.
Yeah,
So
that worked
when
until I stopped.
yes, it's
Yeah.
and that's just in clinical practice. I just find over and over those formulas are proved to be super effective. And if something hangs around for 2,000 years, there's got to be a reason for it.
Absolutely. And what you're saying is you made a shift to more the herbal side.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is such a mess when you when you don't know anything about it and you're Googling. I mean, you get all of these different advice.
Yeah.
What are we to do about that? It's jungle, I feel.
When it comes to Chinese herbal medicine, just go to a practitioner. It's
Okay.
it's it's like the basic unit of Chinese herbal medicine is not the herb, it is the formula. We diagnose, then we prescribe a formula, then we modify that formula with individual herbs for the patient. The individual herbs are actually the least important part of that process. I once studied with a doctor who prescribed a 3 herb formula for a patient. I didn't recognize it. So I was like, what's that formula? He said that is Wei Ling, which is a common formula for gastritis and stomach upset. And I was like, so 3 herbs. Wei Ling has 3 herbs, but they're not 3 herbs. They're 3 different herbs you prescribed. He's like, oh yeah, I substituted all 3 herbs, but it's still Wei Ling because the principle underlying the formula is the same, even though all the herbs have been replaced. So yeah, when it comes to that, if you want to use individual herbs, use Western herbalism, use naturopathy, use the disciplines that work with individual herbs. But if you want Chinese herbal medicine, you need to go to somebody who understands diagnosis and formulas.
Is a homeopath. Is that
Hmm.
it?
Homeopathy, yeah, you can use that, yeah. But yeah.
I went to one I think last year, and we had a good cooperation until until she talked about changing my diet.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason that kind of triggered me because I'm already doing what I can.
Yes,
So I just felt on top of everything, I had to do something that's just gonna, and when you are feeling sick, it like it can just be too much. That's how I felt. And so then
absolutely.
I stopped the whole thing because then I didn't trust it anymore. Sort of. So that was in my question before a little bit, like when things add up. w- Yeah. Can you say something?
Well, what I try to do is I try to support the patient as best I can. One of the reasons I like treating with herbs is that immediately you're on a longer time frame, right? With acupuncture, I might be seeing somebody twice a week. With herbs, I see them. The shortest interval is usually once every 2 weeks, sometimes even longer. Okay, so you're not trying to make the person feel better tomorrow. You're trying to make them feel better over a 2 week period, you know? And what I'm trying to do is basically get somebody to that 65% tipping point where there's a bit of momentum. They're starting to feel a bit better. They're starting to feel a little bit control over their life. And I'm like, hey, do you know what would really help you maintain this momentum? Maybe let's cut dairy out of your diet. And
Mm.
here's how we do it. You know, we add things in so that you don't need dairy anymore. And this is why we're doing it. The reason you're feeling better is because I've been using these herbs. To support those herbs, you can do it through diet. And then maybe we can transition off the herbs. And now you don't need the herbs anymore because you're on this new awesome diet that is giving you. So there's a mental game being played there as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You can't always do that. Sometimes somebody is just in the dietary equivalent of a recent car accident and you're just pulling them from the burning wreckage and you're just like, you just need to stop eating 80% of what you're eating and have some vegetable soup for a couple of days, but overall I try to work the first way when I can.
Mm-mm. That sounds reasonable to
Mm-hmm.
introduce it slowly and and saying that's what the herbs did anyway. So
Yeah.
it sounds like that's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah. But is there, I think I have a question around, is there an endpoint to this? Because it can just continue. Okay, now I don't drink milk. Now what's the next? No meat. And then it just continues.
Mm-hmm.
Then you just have like a yogi meal.
Yeah. You go live in a monastery at the top of a mountain, eat nothing but air, you
Yeah.
know?
Yes. Just don't eat. It's much easier.
My my thinking is that your health is something that you use. It is a resource and you do it in order to find your joy.
Mm.
Okay. And your joy should be your purpose. It could be family, could be career, could be creativity. Whatever your joy is, whatever lights your heart fire is is medically relevant. As in, I have people that are following regimes of diet and exercise and supplements and stuff to such an extent that they're miserable. And that comes up in Chinese medicine. We call it heart yang deficiency, you know? And the heart yang is very important. And yang generates yin and yin generates yang. And actually, sometimes by taking people off supplements and literally bringing joy back into their life, that's not just a nice thing to have. It's actually medically essential, you know? So yeah, I remember I was living in the south of China for a couple of months. I was just studying Tai Chi and Chinese in Guilin province, and they found out I was a Chinese medicine doctor, and one of the teachers came for a consultation. Excuse me, and she was like a very self-serious woman who was trying to do everything right with her diet and her, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I took her pulse and tongue, I did the diagnosis, and I was like, you know what you need? It's like, have a cup of coffee every morning just to give you a bit of a boost. And coffee is bitter, so it connects with the heart. The flavors are associated with the elements in the organs. And I was like, and just relax. And I was like, if you have an exam coming up that you know you're going to get 80 in, but if you really cram, you can get 90, just take the 80. I was like, literally take the pressure off yourself and actively choose joyful things. Hang out with friends. If she drank, I would have recommended she have the odd glass of wine or something. And she felt so much better, so much better. And then another teacher came to me and she was like, okay, what do I need? And then I was like, you need to rebuild your entire diet from scratch. You need about 8 months of herbal medicine. You need to probably move house. I think you're around mold. And she was like, you just told the other lady to have a cup of coffee. And I was like, I'm really sorry. If I thought that would work for you, I would give you that. But you need the other path. You need the path of ashes and hard work. So
Yeah, that's not fair. It's not
no,
fair.
it's not fair. No, it's not, but it's the way it is.
Oh, but I'm hearing you. Joy is medically essential.
Yeah.
Ah, how valuable is that? But you wouldn't say that the other one had been in too much joy, right? Or would you?
No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
It was also a lack of joy, but it was just another way
No,
to.
she had what we call dampness or shu, and it takes longer to shift. When dampness can be a physical presence in the body as well that needs to be cleared out. It can be phlegm or high cholesterol or fluid retention and so on. So like when it becomes physical, when it moves from the chi level to what we call the blood level, where it becomes manifest in the body, it's just slower to clear. And this second lady was probably a lady that had been looking for quick fixes her whole life. And
Mm.
she actually needed to walk the slow road. Whereas the first lady was a lady that was too conscientious and was
Wow.
always hard on herself.
Yeah.
And she actually needed to just take it easy a little bit.
Mhm.
The middle pillar path, Mannah, it always comes back to, if you're too far to the left, you need to move to the right. If you're too far to the right, you need to move to the left.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just remembering what I said about feeling bad for not being at work.
Mm-hmm.
And now I am employed,
Mm-hmm.
and so I know that being sick would give me that on top of being sick is
Yeah.
I'm missing out on, not just that I'm missing out, but I'm feeling, mm, I'm trying not to say guilty.
Mm-hmm.
It's just responsible maybe for
Yeah.
letting a lot of people down.
Yeah.
And that adds to it. So I'm just remembering that from what you're talking about with pressuring yourself, and that's, can you sympathize in that that kind of adds to the illness?
Absolutely. But and I do, and I personally relate to that quite strongly. It's something I struggle with. But I'll propose another perspective on it, which is that illness is revealing
Mm.
an overabundance of responsibility that you feel to other people. It's bringing it to the surface. It's bringing it to a place where you can't ignore it, you know? So, what's
Yeah.
that quote? I think it's Gerald Manley Hopkins, and it's like, illness is the hole by which spirit enters,
Mm. Mm.
you know?
That's similar to, that's where the cracks where the light comes in.
Yes, yeah, yeah. There's a crack in everything. That's where the light comes in.
Oh yes, and I think it's a good way to it's bringing us full circle, because you were talking about that in the beginning, that rather than to look at it as something that's wrong with us, then that it's signals something. I guess that's my word for it, but that it shows us something,
Mm-hmm.
all of these symptoms.
Yeah.
It's just not a very kind way of showing it. Like, we all want to avoid it, don't we? Do you
Mm.
think, what do you think actually about what I said, that that might be that unconscious part of you that wants to be sick to avoid something? Is that part of your theory?
Or is it protecting you?
Yeah, how?
You know, like maybe you don't really want to be there.
Yeah.
You know, there's this interesting phenomenon where if we go back to the wood element is the element of expansion, outward growth, creativity, putting your mark on the world. Okay. What the wood element wants you to be doing, excuse me, is whatever you want. With it hates being constrained, right? There's a formula that treats the wood element constraint. We call it Xiao Yao San, which means the free and easy wanderer. Okay, because it's the idea that if you're wound up and you go for a walk in the woods with no responsibilities, it calms you down. Okay. But that's not life, is it? In life, we often have to do things we don't like.
Yeah.
Okay. We have to get up when we don't want to get up. We have to go to bed when we don't want to go to bed. You know, somebody asked a Zen monk, what is Zen? And he said, eat when you're hungry, drink when you're thirsty, sleep when you're tired. The person said, everyone does that. And the monk said, nobody does that. You know? So growing up means making these compromises within our body. We can't just do what we want when we want anymore. So then you ask, why are we doing it? And I think if we're doing it with purpose, it's almost joyful to take
Yes.
the toll in our bodies. There is a pleasure in giving of ourselves and using our health and using our physicality to accomplish something greater. But then if we are not on that path, we will probably crash, or we will need a lot of extra supports, antibiotics, coffee, distractions, Netflix, whatever it is, to keep us on that path. And this is very highfalutin. I'm not trying to sound judgmental here, but I
I
think
don't
there's.
feel it is. I feel it's so meaningful. I'm so glad you're bringing it in, because I was just having a little bit of an existential crisis when you were talking about why do we need to do the things that why can't we just wake up when we want to naturally,
Mm,
all of that? Because that is something that I've noticed, and it bothers me a lot. Why can't I just do what I want to do? But that is such a meaningful piece, that it's when there's purpose to it. And again, that's something that I experience for myself, that I can do a job because I'm passionate about it.
yeah.
and then I can take care of myself afterwards if,
Yes.
because probably some of my needs were not met during that period, but I'm there for
And
it afterwards. Yeah.
and this is this whole thing about balance. Oh, I only slept 4 hours last night, so I need to get 8 hours every night. Well, if you're running a music festival
Yeah.
that you're delighted with, you might get 3 or 4 hours sleep a night for a few days, but you're not going to feel it if you're joyful. You're allowed deplete and replenish. And I feel one of the issues with our society is that we don't put aside time for replenishing, right? You know, we it's fine to burn yourself out. It's actually okay to burn the candle at both ends for a while. It's good. That's the way things are needed. When the harvest comes, it's all hands on deck, bringing it in. But then what happens after the harvest? A festival, celebration, a holiday, you know?
That yeah, potentially, right? Ideally, right?
Ideally, historically, even. But we've
Yeah.
lost that because we must always be producing. We have a mortgage to pay, we have health insurance to pay, to pay for the illnesses would develop what we're trying to pay the mortgage. We've got all of these different responsibilities, and we can't just lie fallow and replenish anymore because that's the society we live in. So, who said it? In the current society, rest is a revolutionary act.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're spot on. And one thing is the society we live in. Another thing, or maybe it's the same thing, is that we've internalized that.
Yes.
So at work, we also have those periods. I work with the substance abusers, and I'm not sure that's the right word in English.
No,
But
yeah, sure.
talk about, yeah, and because it's funded by the government, sometimes there's money, sometimes there's no money for
Mm,
the help,
mm,
and so there's period where it's really that, like you said, all hands on deck, like we're just really pulling through. And then at the moment we have a low season, but what's happening in us is like, you know, we need to do something,
yeah.
and we're not just relaxing.
No.
So yeah, it's just really spot on, because if we were able to just do that, take our time and say, that's, we have just been working hard. So actually, this is, I don't even want to say earned it, but it's
It's
appropriate.
just appropriate. It's the way things go. Look at farmers; they're very wise. Like they know what they're doing,
Yes.
and it's not exactly a Chinese medicine construct, but the idea of the adrenal cycle, right? When you're tired and you tell your body to keep going, your body produces adrenaline. And then
Mm.
because you're wound up, you don't sleep as well. So next day you're more tired. So the body produces more adrenaline. And all of a sudden you're running on pure adrenaline. And we have this word stress. And what we forget is stress is really good for the body. It's really good. Adrenaline, cortisol, extremely good for the body in short bursts. It's
Period.
it's when it becomes chronic that everything goes wrong. And breaking adrenal cycles is something I come up against all the time in my clinic, and I'm sure you do too, as well, in the work you do, Mannah. But one thing I've found very good, what I've told people to do, is make friends with boredom. If you
Mm.
are really, really, really bored for like an extended period of time, the adrenaline is probably leaving your system. And the thing is, nowadays, we all have these horrible, poisonous devices in our pockets. There's no such thing as boredom anymore. It's been eradicated. Isn't that wild? We don't just sit and be anymore because we're stressed from work. What'll I do? I'll go on Twitter and hear about conflicts and catastrophes and crimes around the world. And every one of those tells your mind you are not safe, you are not safe, you are not safe. And then you go on Instagram and you're like, you can't relax, you're too fat, you're too ugly, your hair's the wrong color. you know, it's never safe. So, of course, our body is still in fight or flight mode. Of course, it's still full of adrenaline and cortisol. And what I find is that most of us have several layers of um, distraction. Okay. I'm not working anymore. I'll look at my phone, put my phone away. I'll put on Netflix. I'm sick of Netflix. I'll ring my friend. Sick of my friend. I'll go to the pub. And it's when you get to the end of all of those little triggers that you use, all those little distractions, and you find the boredom there. You're like, I'm so bored and I've done all the distracting things I normally do. I'm so bored. I have to do something new. And that I feel I usually tell my patients that are adrenalized, try to get to that place and see what the new thing is when you don't have adrenaline in your system anymore, or when you're not trying to distract.
Right. But except that it's really hard to get to that point if you if you're going through all the
Oh
distractions,
God, yeah.
because
Incredibly hard.
they keep coming. I'm a publisher. I keep publishing and other
Yeah.
people keep publishing. It is never ending. And I have that bookshelf. I need to read all of those books as well.
Yeah.
It's like that. I think I would have to decide for myself to be bored, right?
Yes.
If I just continued, it does not end. I
Yeah.
cannot imagine it. And it is incredible, like you're saying, that this has really changed, because I remember, just to mention another sickness story. I remember when I was pregnant many years ago. I have a son who is 16 years old now, and I was sick, and I guess I had a phone, but it was not that kind of phone.
Yeah.
And I was just reading one book again and again. I mean, I was so narrow, and I was incredibly bored.
Yeah.
Um, and I think back to that time, because that is so weird that it wouldn't happen for me now.
No.
With YouTube, with everything, I have to make a decision to be bored.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, um, muscular people, muscular tanned people, that was associated with the working class, right? You did not want to be tanned and muscular. You wanted to be pale and flabby,
Okay.
soft, because, hard work just happened. Everyone had to work hard. And you wanted to demonstrate, you're like, oh, I don't need to do that.
Like you're privileged.
Yeah. And now what do? We have whole gyms available so that we can go in there. We have whole infrastructures available so we can make ourselves tanned and muscular, because physical labor has left our lives. So we have needed to create spaces where we can practice it. The same thing needs to happen with boredom, because boredom has left our lives. We need to now artificially create spaces where we can practice it. I call it boredom because I do find with like mindfulness and meditation of certain kinds, when it's done right, of course, it's phenomenally beneficial, but it can be weaponized. It can be like your corporation going, oh, if you're stressed, it's because you haven't been doing your 90 minutes of mindfulness a day kind of thing. And it can become a chore. Whereas boredom, and it's like rest is a revolutionary act, a place where you go and just do nothing. You have no purpose. You don't need to do your 20 minutes of meditation and your body scan and your chakra opening. You just need to sit there for 20 minutes. Saunas are quite good for that, you know.
Yeah.
So we have kind of these places, but we need more.
Yeah. Because it's not. Yeah. No, that's excellent. That's a great suggestion. You're just making for all of us, because I'm like visioning we have gyms, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people, that's very normal to go into that
Yeah.
sauna. That, I guess that's normal as well, but
Mm-hmm.
then you also have to confront other naked bodies, and
Yeah.
we would need like stillness centers. Yeah, that would be amazing if it was just as normal as either being at a gym or running.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll happen because people, whether they're conscious or not, they're feeling the need for it, because so many of us have turned to get against religious organizations and so on. We don't really go to mass and things like that anymore, which was a place where we could be
Yeah.
quiet,
Yeah.
for an hour a week.
Mm,
So it needs to come back.
mm,
And I think community is important
mm.
as well. We can all sit in your room and be quiet. That's wonderful. But to be quiet with other people is very special too.
Yeah. It is actually, yeah, a little bit part of it's a nuance in my story from before, because I'm really obsessed with the IFS. Do you know that? Internal family systems? No, but the whole point is going inside.
Okay.
Going inside, looking at what is it inside of me that's, like I was talking about the anxious part before, like being with that anxious part. That's kind of one way of saying it. And I'm obsessed with that inner world because I've been so dissociated from it.
Yeah.
The thing that happened in this weekend was a reminder, oh wait, other people matter. To my internal process so
Yes.
much.
Yeah.
You know what they just did in that community, in relationship, it tremendously, now my body is cured, you know, from what happened in community.
Yes. Yes. And so much of the work we do now is, when we talk about inner work, it's usually you're sitting in a room with a therapist who's focusing everything on you, and I remember hearing an indigenous practitioner of entheogenic medicine, so ayahuasca or something similar. He was talking about how he's like, that model is great for certain things, but he's like, if somebody is going through a plant medicine journey and something very, very dark comes upon them, they feel like they killed a man or something like this. A therapist will say, go into that. What do you think that means? Where could that have come from? How does it feel? Where he's like, what I can say is, oh, there's a dark spirit passing through. Don't worry, do this to clear it, and we move on.
What's the point of that?
Yeah.
Yes.
But, we are actors within an ecosystem. And, and again, it's the middle pillar path. I think right now, a lot of us are doing a lot of solo work, and God help me, I am so guilty of this. I am allergic to group work. Mannah. I really struggle with it, which probably means I need it, because opening and receiving would be things I need to work on. And to work on being open and receptive while closed down on your own is, sure, there's groundwork you can lay for sure, but like at the end of the day, sometimes you just need to be around people, and then it could absolutely go back the other way, where everything becomes group work and the quirks of the individual are not being recognized anymore, in which case we need to go back to solo therapy. So
Okay, so we have to end this conversation at some point, even though I love being here. My anxious part likes it too.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. It's been wonderful, Mannah.
I just wanted to give one comment about your chart. Is that okay?
Yes, I actually wanted to ask you about this because you've been very graciously came to me with your illness pattern and came to me for advice. And actually, that's something I wanted to say earlier. I would be very honored if you would tell me what you feel from my chart.
You have a little diagnosis too?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, actually, okay, I want to say just 2 words, and then I can expand on what you want. But this is what caught my eye. It's just 2 words, and it's repairing the emotional body. Okay, 4 words, but repairing the emotions. What does that say to you?
Um, yeah. I was in a situation when I was young where it wasn't safe to express emotions
Yeah,
authentically. And I need to thank that part of me because it kept me safe.
exactly.
But yes, now that opening and allowing and that honest expression, and repairing the emotional body, yes, that embodied sense of the emotions, because when you put your emotions away in glass boxes like that where you can't feel them anymore, they become somatic. You
Yeah.
start to feel them through your body,
Mhm.
so
Exactly. And
yeah.
that's very Wigoian thing as well, that it comes through somatically. And one piece is what you just said, and another piece is, and then that is makes a lot of sense. And what I've heard you say your journey is going a little bit more to that level, in the mind, everything is in the mind. Um, I mean, emotions would be part of the mind in your understanding as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that journey is, I think, really significant, and in that the fourth house that I'm looking at, that you are really able to help people there, and you have really accurate analysis for what's going on in the emotional body. That's the other piece of doing the work yourself. It's also that you have real competencies there.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you, Mannah.
Mm.
Any advice on any strengths in my chart that I could bring to bear in order to help me get there? Any advice you'd have as a therapist?
Yeah, in your chat, I mean, deep listening. You're you're a great listener, according to your chat. I also feel it, of course, but I'm really helped from looking at that Venus conjunct your South Node in Libra. Really, really good with listening, and because it's what people say, right? Often we reveal ourselves. We say it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're listening for the solution, clients are going to give it to you from what we're not aware of, we're actually saying.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot in that, in listening. Really, what is the other person saying? Yeah. And of course, yeah, you were talking about community, so that's definitely a part of it. But because your North Node is, I mean, you're an incredible creative person. I just want to say, if you had your chat done with me, I would say that wow, a lot of creativity, a lot of fire, so much creativity. And your third house, it's both your author and it's also the photography, because it's just some kind of creative communication. So there's all of that, and then bringing that into to the public through the 11th house. But then your ruler of your North Node comes back to the fourth house. So that's why, again, no matter what we do, no matter what we do, it's back to that emotional body
Mm-hmm.
and to the roots of who you are. And that is such a quality. Oh, I have so much respect for the fourth house and the Cancer archetype. It's incredible, incredible attunement to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can say how. Then that's through the Virgo. So that's through your analysis, through all of your competencies. That doesn't come easy. And of course, it can be overused. So nothing can come easy. But like you were talking about that kind of shadow that sometimes things has to be hard, right? But actually turned around, yeah, you are able to do the hard work. You're able to do the hard work so that you can help people incredibly, because you do have different toolbox. It's not just one thing. It's like you know about a lot of things, um, and specifically, yeah, healing that deep hidden part of us, the things we don't see in public.
Mm-hmm. That's a great gift you've given me, Mannah. Thank you very much. I'm trying to remain open and receiving to it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Is that when you say it like that, is there any skepticism coming up?
No, God, no skepticism. I think the skepticism died a long time ago, unfortunately. It was a very useful distraction for a long time. It served me very well. My skepticism allowed me to keep a lot of things at bay. Um, but the body knows, even if the mind doesn't. And yeah, there's, yeah, thank you.
Sure. Oh, wonderful. Anthony O'Connor, my best recommendations. I also feel like booking a time. Can you book a time with you? Is it even possible? Yeah.
I maintain a very small client load, but people feel free to reach out to me absolutely on the Instagram. I'm sure you'll put the links in the description or something. But yeah, or if you have questions that you want me to discuss on the WesHtern Philosophy podcast, that's with myself and my friend Bart. We'd be very open to that as well.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful
Thank
day in Ireland.
you very much, Mannah. Lovely talking to you.